Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. My name is Daniel Roth. I'm not a guard, an inmate, or even a full-time employee of the California Department of Corrections. I'm just a visiting teacher, a GED instructor contracted through a community outreach program tied to the state university. I came to Ironwood State Prison 3 times a week to help inmates earn diplomas. Some were trying to turn their lives around, some were gaming the system, and some were just killing time. It was Tuesday, April 8, 2025. I remember because the lesson plan I'd printed out the night before had Tuesday written in the upper right-hand corner in red pen. I always marked it that way to keep my schedule straight. I got to the front gate around 8:40 a.m. as usual, passed through the first security checkpoint, then the second, then handed over my phone and keys in exchange for a yellow visitor's badge. The usual CO correctional officer on duty, Torres, gave me a tired nod as I signed in. Ironwood State Prison sits on a lonely patch of scrubland about 10 miles outside of Blythe, California, just a few dusty miles from the Arizona border. It's medium security, officially, but over the years it's housed some tough men, gang affiliates, violent repeat offenders, even some with psychiatric holds. The walls are topped with razor wire, the cell blocks are arranged in a grid, and the central yard is split between red gravel and concrete. The heat, even in April, was already pushing 90 by mid-morning. The education wing is in Building C across the yard from the medical wing, and near the workshops where inmates fix state vehicles and learn carpentry. That morning, I had a class of 6 students waiting. There was Leonard Lenny Briggs in his late 40s, doing 10 years for weapons trafficking. He had thick glasses, a shaved head, and a surprisingly philosophical take on the U.S. Constitution. Then there was Troy Ellis, a younger guy, maybe 24, in for assault. Tattooed neck, bad attitude, but smart, real smart. Isaac Gomez was in the room too, polite, Hispanic, mid-30s, convicted of auto theft. He actually helped me set up the projector most mornings. James J.D. Dalton, a skinny white guy who'd done time in 4 different facilities, and Donald Hayes, a quiet guy who'd been inside since he was 19. Rounding it out was Henry Wu, a soft-spoken man in his 50s with a background in accounting. His charges were white-collar, but he'd been here nearly 5 years. We were halfway through a lesson on basic algebra when the first siren started blaring. That sound wasn't uncommon. Sometimes a fight would break out on the yard or a cell search would turn up contraband. But this siren was different. It was continuous. A long, rising whine followed by a recorded voice crackling over the PA system. Lockdown. All units initiate containment. Medical incident in Wing B. Doors to remain sealed until cleared by command. I remember the looks exchanged in the room. Lenny stopped mid-equation and lowered his pencil. J.D. leaned back in his chair. "Medical incident?" he muttered. "That's new." The door slammed shut automatically, a loud metallic clang that made all of us flinch. Then we heard the first scream. It came from somewhere outside. Not the kind of scream you hear in fights, not rage, not pain. Panic. Absolute panic. Within minutes, the PA system cut back in, only this time, it wasn't the usual protocol message. It was someone yelling. "Seal off the med wing. They're biting. They're biting through. Jesus, get that door closed. Get..." Cut to static. I moved to the window that overlooked the concrete walkway between buildings. Torres, the same guard who had signed me in, was running, sprinting toward the command post by the yard's central tower. His shirt was soaked in blood. He didn't make it. From the far corner of the medical building, I saw them. 3 inmates. No, not just inmates. Something was wrong with them. One had a shattered arm but moved like it wasn't even there. Another had blood smeared across his chest and face, but his eyes glassy, too wide, pupils gone, were locked on Torres. They tackled him. We couldn't see the rest from the window, but we heard it. That's when everything fell apart. Donald whispered, "What the hell's going on?" But no one answered. The power flickered. The lights buzzed, then held. I backed away from the window and locked eyes with Isaac, who had gone pale. "They're in the med wing," he said, voice low. "That's where they quarantine inmates with flu, shingles, whatever's going around. I heard a couple of guys were coughing blood last week. Looked like food poisoning." I asked if any of them had been transferred to General Pop. He nodded. "Yeah, Block E." That's when JD stood up. "E Block connects to here through the laundry tunnel. If they breach that..." The PA system crackled again, but this time nothing came out. Just static. Then the emergency locks hissed and released. That's not supposed to happen. During lockdown, classroom doors are supposed to stay sealed, but something had triggered a manual override. A second later, the hallway outside filled with the sound of shouting. We cracked the door and peeked out. Officer Medina, the floor CO assigned to education, was limping toward us, blood trailing down his leg. "Inside," he hissed, pointing. "Get the hell inside." We pulled him in and barricaded the door with a filing cabinet. He slumped to the floor, his leg gashed open above the knee, pant leg soaked through. "They're infected," he said, panting. "Something came through medblock. Some of the guys, they got sick fast. Then they started tearing into people, biting them, like animals." Henry, the accountant, knelt beside him. "Is it drugs? Some kind of bad batch?" "No, I know drugs. I've seen withdrawals. This is something else." Through the door window, we saw the hallway lights flicker again. Then we heard another scream. Closer this time. Donald checked the door's glass pane. "We gotta move," he said. "If this whole place is going under, we can't stay in here." I said what we were all thinking. Where do we even go? That's when Lenny stepped up. "There's a tunnel," he said. "Runs under the building. Service access HVAC and electrical. I helped install new conduit down there last year. It runs from here to the workshop wing. If we can make it to the south building, we might reach the sally port or the perimeter fence." Medina nodded, half conscious. "You'd need a key card. Mine's still good. Use it." Troy grabbed it. "You're not coming?" Medina shook his head weakly. "Not on this leg." We stared at each other. I wasn't a prison break type, I was a teacher. These men were my students, some of them violent, all of them convicted. But at that moment, they were the only people I could count on, and I had a decision to make. I nodded. That was it. Not a speech, not a plan, just a nod. And it changed everything. Henry and Donald moved to help Medina off the floor, while Isaac grabbed the metal pipe we used to prop open the AV cart. Lenny took the keycard from Troy and checked the corridor window again. The hallway outside was empty now, but we could hear distant banging, rhythmic, metallic, and wrong. It echoed through the ductwork, giving the impression that the sound was coming from everywhere at once. We unblocked the door, staying low. Lenny led the way down the narrow corridor, past the faculty lockers and storage closet. I'd walked this hallway 100 times, but never like this, not with every step sounding like it might be our last. Just before the custodial supply room, Lenny stopped in front of a rust-colored steel door labeled Maintenance Access, Authorized Personnel Only. He slid the keycard across the sensor. The reader beeped red, then green. The lock disengaged with a magnetic snap. The door opened onto a steep concrete stairwell, lit by emergency flood lamps. A hot, metallic draft rose from below. The air smelled like machine oil and mildew. Lenny pointed downward. Leads to sublevel. HVAC, trunk line, and utilities. If it's not flooded or chained, we can get to workshop south. No one argued. One by one, we descended. The tunnel wasn't made for people. It was a maintenance crawl more than a corridor 7 feet high, 6 feet wide, packed with conduit, fiber trunk, and HVAC ducting. The floor sloped gently, and the walls were raw concrete, moisture bleeding through hairline cracks. Our footsteps echoed in dull smacks. We passed junction boxes stenciled with prison maintenance codes. PWR MN2 HVC Cetral Com TRNK. This wasn't some Hollywood escape tunnel. It was claustrophobic and hot, every inch humming with the vibration of a prison on emergency backup. Halfway through, we passed a blown-out fuse box blackened, still smoking. The smell of scorched insulation and copper hit us hard. Isaac checked it and muttered, "Shorted. That's why the overheads are acting up." A noise behind us made everyone freeze. It wasn't a scream or footsteps. It was worse. The sharp, unmistakable echo of metal dragging across concrete. Slowly, deliberately, something was down here with us. JD glanced over his shoulder, pale. "Keep moving." We picked up the pace. The tunnel turned sharply near the south wing where an access hatch led upward, a maintenance lift, rarely used. Lenny found the panel for it and jabbed the call button. Nothing. He tried again. Still dead. Troy kicked the wall in frustration. "Backup power's toast. We'll have to force the door at the end of the line." We reached the final bend just as the tunnel narrowed again. This was the part Lenny had warned us about, a constriction point where utility lines converged, forcing us single file. He went first, squeezing past conduit. I followed, then Henry, Troy, and the rest. JD took up the rear. We made it through barely, into a slightly wider area where the tunnel intersected with the old boiler loop, an abandoned system from the facility's original build in the 1980s. Lenny banged twice on the steel access hatch marked WKS South BLDG. He turned. "This opens behind the tool cages. Once we're in, we can head upstairs and check for a clear route to the vehicle yard, or maybe the loading dock. But if anyone's already turned in there..." He didn't finish the sentence. We readied ourselves. Isaac handed out makeshift weapons, a crowbar, a rebar rod, a rusted pipe wrench. I took the wrench. My hands trembled around the cold steel. Lenny opened the hatch slowly. The hinges groaned like they hadn't moved in years. Warm air rushed in, not the sterile air of a clean corridor, but the stale, grimy warmth of a workshop gone still. The lights were flickering in a slow, irregular pulse. Fluorescent tubes buzzed above rows of empty workstations, tool racks, and chained lockers. We stepped in quietly. No one spoke. The workshop was deserted, but not untouched. A blood smear stretched across the polished concrete floor. A single shoe, state-issued canvas lay beside a lathe machine. One of the tool cages was open, its gate half bent. A sledgehammer leaned against the wall like someone had dropped it mid-swing. Donnell moved toward the stairwell that led to the south hallway. "If we're lucky," he whispered. "They stayed near med block. If we're real lucky, we can hit the generator shed and signal the tower." We crept up the stairs. The second floor was an administrative catwalk that overlooked the workshop, mostly glass-paneled offices for instructors and supervisors. At the far end was the locked double door that led to the southern corridor. Troy tried the latch. Locked. He turned to Henry. "We can bust it." "Wait," Henry said. He pointed at the fire suppression panel next to the door. "Power's dead. But if we cut the alarm line, it should drop the magnetic seal. Most doors in this wing run on fail secure, No power means no lock. Isaac pulled the panel cover off and started working the wiring with a multi-tool he'd swiped from the workshop bench. I don't know how he knew what he was doing, but within seconds, the light on the lock turned red, then dark. The doors clicked open a hair. Troy pulled them apart slowly. The corridor beyond was lined with vending machines and maintenance lockers. It was empty at first glance, but near the intersection with cell block F, we saw movement. Someone was stumbling. A man in an orange jumpsuit, barefoot, head twitching like a marionette with snapped strings. His skin was grayish around the mouth, mottled with bruising, and his eyes, no light, just rage. He turned toward us with a low gurgle and sprinted. Lenny stepped forward and swung the crowbar low, a brutal arc that struck the man across the knees. The infected inmate buckled, hit the ground, and immediately tried to claw forward. Troy brought the rebar down twice, one to the back, one to the head. The body twitched, then went still. We stood in silence. No one moved. Then I noticed JD wasn't with us. I turned back. He was still at the far end of the workshop, stuck at the tunnel choke. A figure was coming toward him. It was wearing a CO uniform. A woman tall, with her name badge half ripped off. Officer Brenner. I'd seen her maybe a dozen times in the yard. Her eyes were sunken, mouth bloodied, skin torn at the cheek. She moved in a jerking gait but fast, like she didn't care about muscle or pain. JD tried to run, but it was too late. She lunged, teeth bared. He blocked with a steel pole, screaming. I started back down the stairs before I even thought about it. Wrench raised. Troy grabbed me by the arm. "You'll get bit. He's already—" We all saw it. JD went down under her weight, screaming. But even after the screaming stopped, I kept staring. I hadn't known him well. He was just another inmate, skinny, sarcastic, probably a lifer, but in that moment it didn't matter. He'd been one of us. We sealed the stairwell. No one spoke for a long time. When we did move again, it was with new urgency. The infected weren't just loose, they were spreading fast. If the infection had already reached the workshops and the southern wings, then it was only a matter of time before every cell block and every hallway was crawling with them. Donald checked a wall map. Generator shed is 200 feet south of here, past the service courtyard. If we can get it running, we can power the comms, maybe even the gate relay. Lenny nodded. But we've got to go outside. None of us wanted to hear that. Outside was exposed. Outside was where visibility dropped, where sound carried, where there were no walls to hold them back. But we were out of options. We passed through the rear service door using Medina's keycard and stepped out into the California sun, blinding, hot, and surreal. Razor wire glittered on every fence. The guard towers loomed in the distance, unmanned. Birds circled high above, disturbed from the roofs. Sirens still wailed in cycles, interrupted by bursts of static and garbled voice commands no one was responding to. The generator shed was just ahead, a small cinder block building surrounded by a utility fence. We ran for it. That's when the second group hit us, not infected this time. Inmates, 3 of them, rounded the workshop wall. Rough men in prison blues, holding shanks, broom handles, a claw hammer. Not turned, just desperate. They thought we had a way out. One shouted, "Drop it, drop your gear, that card gets us through B-Gate." Troy didn't hesitate. He rushed forward and drove his shoulder into the first man's ribs. The 2 collapsed in a tangle. I backed up toward the generator shed door, while Donald swung his wrench in a tight arc at the second. Isaac and Henry flanked me. The third inmate, a huge guy I vaguely recognized from the library shift, came at us with a broken table leg. He hit the chain-link fence hard, then ducked through. Lenny stepped forward and jabbed the crowbar into the man's gut. He doubled over. We moved fast. We got the door open, dragged Troy in, and locked it behind us. Inside, the air was even hotter, a concrete box full of dust and diesel fumes. The main generator was offline, but intact. Isaac and Henry went to work, trying to prime the fuel intake and crank the system. The generator itself was an older Cummins diesel unit, maybe 200 kilowatts, painted industrial green with chipped stencils on the side reading CalDoc Backup PWR3. Isaac opened the fuel access and checked the manual choke while Henry inspected the battery bank. These weren't modern auto-start systems. This was a crank-fed relic from the late 90s, kept alive with state maintenance budgets and duct tape. "I think we've got diesel left," Isaac called out. "Gauge shows a quarter tank, enough for maybe 2 hours." Donald stood by the louvered vent, watching shadows flicker between the fence slats. He had a fire axe now, taken from the wall of the workshop. I held the rebar tight in both hands, trying not to let them see how much I was shaking. A sudden thunk rang through the side wall. Something had slammed into the fence. Hard, the metal rattled violently. Another crash followed, then another. It wasn't just one. A group of them, maybe 6 or 7, had reached the generator shed and were clawing their way around the perimeter. We couldn't see them directly, but their distorted shadows played across the vented sunlight. Twisted bodies, heads snapping side to side, arms slapping at metal. Henry hit the ignition. The engine choked once, twice, then roared to life in a coughing, uneven growl that quickly steadied. The shed vibrated with the deep, rhythmic thrum of power flowing again. Lights flickered to life overhead. The wall control panel blinked green, shed power online, and an external relay kicked over. "Hot damn!" Isaac whooped. The relief only lasted a second. The fence outside bent inward with a sharp screech. The infected were starting to climb, and this was no solid steel barrier, just a 10-foot chain-link utility fence bolted to concrete posts. It had never been meant to stop humans, let alone what they'd become. "We've got to move," Donald said, pulling me back from the door. "They're going to be on us in less than a minute." Troy was already digging through the wall cabinet. He found a handheld radio and passed it to me. "See if the towers are listening." I pressed the button. "Tower control, this is Education Wing. Repeat, this is Education Wing. Generator 3 is online. Requesting evac or instruction. Anyone read?" The response was static. "Try again," Henry barked, already coiling spare wire around the shed door handles. I did, 3 more times. Finally, a voice cracked through the static, choppy, barely legible. "Copy, this is Tower 2, North Yard compromised. Repeat, North Yard. Hold if you can. Evac in progress near Block A." The message cut out. Donald was already at the breaker panel. "Let's reroute power to the south roof antenna. If the repeater's still live, it might punch through." Isaac helped him flip a trio of massive transfer switches, rerouting power away from internal lights and toward the exterior relay ports. The floodlights in the yard blinked once, then surged on. A row of sodium lamps buzzed to life across the roofline of the southern admin building. Outside, the fence gave a final metallic shriek and collapsed inward. "Move!" Lenny shouted, yanking open the rear emergency hatch. We sprinted into the open into direct sunlight and raw chaos. At least a dozen of them spilled through the torn fence behind us. Blood-soaked inmates, half naked, bleeding from faces and arms. A few wore CO uniforms, twisted and stained, eyes blank, blackened with burst capillaries. They didn't hesitate, they charged full sprint. We made a run for the building across the service lane, the South Maintenance Annex. It was 30 yards away, across concrete striped with faded yellow lines. The annex had steel doors and, more importantly, a stairwell that led to the upper floor observation windows high ground. We didn't look back. You don't look back when death is 10 paces behind. Donald reached the door first, axe in hand. He slammed the blade into the emergency crash bar, jamming it down. The rest of us poured through behind him. Troy threw his shoulder into the door and slammed it shut, just as 2 infected slammed into it from the outside. The steel buckled slightly, but held. Inside, the annex was quiet rows of work lockers, supply shelves, air tools, and carted compressors. A microwave blinked 12 o'clock. A ragged calendar on the wall still showed March. A box of donuts had gone green with mold. Everything smelled like sweat and metal. We ran up the stairwell, boots pounding on steel treads, and reached the second floor, a narrow mezzanine lined with the dusty office windows overlooking the back lot. I looked out and saw the full scope of the collapse. The northern yard was gone completely overrun. Fires burned across several segments of the rec yard fence. Smoke poured from the base of Tower 1. No one was in the guard walk. No one manned the yard gates. Something had ripped them open from the inside. I turned the handheld radio back on. Tower 2, this is Education Wing. We have generator power. South antenna is active. Please advise, is there an evac plan? Nothing. Then, south roof, hold position. Bird inbound, repeat inbound. ETA 8 minutes. You must signal, flare, or panel. Copy, I said, my voice shaking. We'll find something. Donald grabbed a red signal panel from the maintenance gear, one of those old-school emergency flags used for directing vehicle traffic. He threw open the window and started waving it in a wide, deliberate pattern. Hope to God someone's watching. I looked around. We've got to slow the infected. Keep them from flooding this wing before evac. Henry nodded. We barricade the stairs and prep the roof. 8 minutes is a long damn time. We set to work. Troy and I dragged a pair of office desks to block the stairwell. Isaac dumped a bucket of ball bearings down the lower steps, old mechanic trick, but effective. Anyone or anything rushing up would hit them like ice. Lenny stacked empty lockers into a makeshift barricade across the rear fire door. Then we waited. Donald kept waving the signal. Every 30 seconds, like clockwork. Behind us, the sound of the infected grew louder. The scratching, the shrieking, the horrible snarling of things that no longer felt pain or fear. Occasionally, something slammed against the wall downstairs. We were almost out of time. A glint appeared in the southern sky, low, fast, with twin rotors slicing through smoke. A Black Hawk. "Helicopter!" I shouted. Donald turned and shouted, "Signal's working. They saw us." The Black Hawk banked hard, flared above the admin building, and began circling. Through the glass, I could see someone inside crew chief maybe gesturing toward us. A loudspeaker burst on. "Roof access, now!" Donald shouted. "Roof hatch is in the janitor's closet. Move!" We charged across the upper floor, boots thudding, weapons in hand. The janitor's closet was barely big enough for 2 people, but inside, bolted into the ceiling, was a steel roof hatch. Lenny scrambled up first, kicked it open with both boots, then hauled himself through. We followed one at a time into the daylight and wind of the rooftop. The Black Hawk was hovering maybe 30 yards away, trying to find a stable hover point without getting too close to the rooftop HVAC units. The pilot made a circular pass while the crew prepared a drop line. Suddenly, from the opposite side of the roof, a door banged open. 3 infected came sprinting out, faces bloodied, one missing a hand, another wearing half of a dock rain poncho. They'd come from the admin block roof access, some route we hadn't known about. They came fast, too fast. Donald met the first one with the axe. It embedded deep into the collarbone, and he yanked it free before spinning to meet the second. I moved in to help, swung the rebar low and caught it in the ankle. sending it tumbling. The third slammed into Lenny, claws flailing, but Troy tackled them both and drove a wrench into the side of the thing's face. The helicopter dropped a fast rope. "Go!" someone inside shouted. Lenny grabbed the rope first and started up, boots kicking against the concrete as the rotors blasted hot air across the roof. One by one, we went up. Donald, Isaac, Troy, Henry, I went last. As I climbed, I looked down and saw a half-dozen infected pouring onto the roof below us. Donald reached down from the helicopter skid and grabbed my wrist, hauling me the last few feet inside. We were airborne seconds later. I collapsed against the floor of the helicopter, gasping for air, covered in sweat and grime. The wind through the open doors was cold and sharp, like ice water after a fever. Below us, the prison was lost. Smoke curled from the rooftops. Fires burned unchecked. Bodies moving and still scattered the yard like toys kicked over in a tantrum. The gates were wide open, the fences shredded. We were the last ones out. No one spoke for a long time. The Black Hawk veered south, banking away from the prison and the rising column of black smoke that marked the collapse of the facility. From this altitude, I could see just how bad it had gotten, not just inside the yard, but beyond it. The surrounding tree line looked scorched in places. Some of the access roads were littered with abandoned vehicles. I saw an overturned prison transport on the highway, flames curling up from under its axle. A CO's uniform jacket flapped from a roadside guardrail like a flag of surrender. The crew chief up front, a weathered-looking man with a buzz cut and Oakley glasses, finally turned and spoke to us over the headset. "Name's Rivas. National Guard. We were on recon when we got your signal. You're damn lucky anyone was monitoring that band." None of us answered right away. Troy just leaned against the inner wall of the chopper, covered in dried blood, staring at the floor with the hollow look of a man who had nothing left to say. Isaac's hands trembled as he wiped diesel grime from his face with a prison-issued blue rag. Henry had his eyes closed, but I wasn't sure if he was resting or just trying not to fall apart. Donald eventually broke the silence. "Where are we headed?" Rivas gave him a quick glance. "Forward operating base, San Joaquin Delta College. FEMA converted it. Not perfect, but it's fenced and secure for now." That last part stuck with me, for now. As the miles slipped beneath us, I looked out the side window again. Towns passed below, some seemingly intact, others clearly not. I recognized bits of Lodi and Stockton in the distance. The big box stores and warehouses near 8 Mile Road looked deserted, but parts of downtown were burning. In a strip mall parking lot, I saw a school bus on its side, the windows blown out. The freeway was gridlocked as far as the eye could see. Cars abandoned at random angles. Some with doors open, some with blood on the pavement beside them. The infection wasn't isolated to the prison. It was everywhere. The helicopter touched down in a cleared lot behind the old Student Union building. Temporary barriers, concrete blocks, steel gates, even shipping containers had been arranged into a makeshift perimeter. Soldiers patrolled the walkways. Some of them looked barely old enough to shave. Others looked like they hadn't slept in days. FEMA tents dotted the quad, and folding tables lined with bottled water, ration packets, and medical supplies gave the place the feel of a battlefield hospital. We were met by a woman in tan BDUs, a black vest, and a clipboard. Her name tag read Lieutenant K. Monroe. She didn't smile, didn't even offer a hand, just ran her eyes over us like she was trying to determine who among us would crack first. "You're the ones from DVI?" she asked. I nodded. "Education wing. We got out with help from Tower 2 in a helicopter, just barely." Her jaw flexed slightly. "We had reports. Thought everyone inside was gone. Donald stepped forward. Not all of us. Not yet. There may still be COs in lockdown rooms. Maybe some survivors holed up in segregation. Monroe scribbled something on her clipboard and said, "You'll be deconned, processed, and assigned to holding until we get full clearances. Medical's already over capacity, so unless you're actively bleeding, don't bother faking it." We were herded past the tents and through a sanitation checkpoint, a line of portable sprayers manned by 2 medics in goggles and gloves. We were sprayed down with diluted hypochlorite, stripped of outer layers, and handed mismatched clean clothes, old college sweatshirts, donated jeans, and surplus boots. Once through the checkpoint, we were each given a wristband orange for non-military evacuees, yellow for high-risk exposure. Everyone from the prison, including me, got yellow. The guards didn't care that I'd been a teacher. I'd come from inside the wire, same as the rest. To them, I was another potential carrier. The next 12 hours blurred together. We were moved between tents, interviewed by grim-faced FEMA staff, and fed protein bars and lukewarm soup out of a metal container labeled USDA humanitarian ration. I didn't sleep. None of us did. Every loud noise outside the tent made us flinch. Every distant shout or helicopter overhead set us on edge. Donald and I were eventually placed in the same tent, a military field shelter with rows of cots and tarps covering the mesh sides. It smelled like sweat, antiseptic, and trauma. "You think it's over?" I asked him. He looked up from where he sat on the edge of the cot, taping a cracked knuckle with gauze. "Hell no. This is just the first breach. The infection doesn't stop at fences. You saw the highway. It's out there now, spreading through neighborhoods, shelters, hospitals." I thought of the inmates who didn't make it out. Mr. Alvarez, the old GED student who'd begged for extra notebooks. Of young Nate from C Block, who had dreams of welding school when he got out. Of Sergeant Wilcox, who used to sneak us donuts when the vending machine broke. All of them had been trapped inside those walls when the infection came, and now the walls meant nothing. Late that night, a man in plainclothes gray windbreaker, tactical boots, worn clipboard pulled me aside for questioning. I never got his name, but he introduced himself as a CDC liaison. His questions weren't casual. "Did you see the origin point of the outbreak? How quickly did symptoms develop after contact? Were any infected exhibiting coordination or retained skills? Did you observe communication between infected?" I answered as best I could, but I could tell he didn't like what he was hearing. He frowned deeper with every response. When I described the CO in the medical wing who'd broken through a steel door after turning, he scribbled something furiously. Then he asked the question I hadn't expected. Did any of the infected hesitate, avoid targets, seem to recognize anyone? I thought of that first moment in the medical wing when the man in the hospital smock had looked directly at me through the glass, head tilted as if measuring. "Maybe," I said. He didn't write that down, just nodded once, tightly, and walked off. The next day, we were told we'd be transferred again, this time to a longer-term facility. They wouldn't tell us where. Rumor in the camp was that FEMA was relocating high-exposure survivors to secure zones near military bases. Some guessed Travis AFB, others said Moffett Field down in Mountain View. Either way, we weren't staying at Delta College. Troy, who'd barely spoken in 2 days, finally asked me as we lined up for the trucks, "You think we're going to get quarantined for good?" I didn't know what to say. Maybe we were, maybe we deserved it. But it also felt wrong, like the system had collapsed, and now the people who survived were being shuffled like cattle, processed instead of protected. The transport trucks were windowless, white, and unmarked. We climbed aboard in silence, hands gripping overhead rails, our yellow wristbands glowing under the dull interior lights. A soldier sealed the back doors with a heavy latch, and then we rolled forward into the unknown. I didn't know if we were heading to safety or to a different kind of prison. All I knew was that I'd gone into DVI to teach to try and help a few men rebuild their lives from inside a broken system. Instead, I'd watched that system fall apart in real time. And out here, beyond the walls, it was still falling. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.